Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, you're checking out the top 5 easiest builds for beginners in the Elder Scrolls Online. This video is actually an extension of my top 10 best beginner sets video, which hopefully you've already seen. I'll put a link for that in the description below if you have not. That video covered which basic gear sets you should focus on acquiring as a new player. Well, in this video, we're actually going a step further, taking some of those sets and seeing how we can use them to create fully fleshed out builds. Again, these are more beginner focused builds for ESO that are fun, very powerful, and easy to play all the way from level 1 to level 50, and even through some of the early CP ranks. And before we get started, you might notice I'm trying a different format for this video. I want to give credit to Skinny Cheeks Gaming for inspiring this style, which I really like because it definitely helps pack in as much information as possible. I'll have a link for his channel in the description below because you should definitely check out his videos, especially if you need more advanced builds for things like group dungeons and trials. Go ahead and drop him a sub too and let him know that HTM sent you. That being said, let's jump right into the list. Starting off our list at number 5, let's talk about the Stamina Warden, specifically the Stam Warden bow build. Lots of fun to play and actually very powerful if you can get the timing right. This could work in both PvE and PvP, so let's go over the basics. Starting off with our choice of race for the build, I do prefer Wood Elf. Wood Elves have extra stamina recovery, and when you do a roll dodge, you actually increase your speed and your potential damage. Redguard is another very nice option for sustain and cost reduction, especially those bow abilities. And Khajiit is just a good all-around option. In terms of food or drink, Dubious Cameron Throne, the purple quality drink, this is very nice because of the stamina health and stam recovery that you get. It also can usually be purchased very cheap on guild traders. If you feel like your recovery is enough, then check out Bewitched Sugar Skulls for the extra stats. For Stone, I would recommend either the Lover for the extra penetration, or you can try the Thief for the extra crit chance. For gear set options, remember this is all about beginner builds. So what I'm going to recommend for this setup, Trainee. This just comes from the starter zones and gives you lots of max stats, stamina, magicka, and health. Health is going to be great for your survival. Of course, stamina is going to increase your damage. And then magicka, because wardens do actually have a lot of utility skills that cost magicka to cast. A second set you can combine with Trainee is going to be Shadow of the Red Mountain. This is a medium armor set. This gives you nice bonuses to your damage, and then for the 5-piece, you can proc this Molten Lava effect from your bow abilities, which does good damage and has a pretty cool visual effect. Now, as a beginner build, you can put these gear pieces really in any equipment slot you want, from jewelry, weapons, body pieces. It does not matter as long as you have 5 of each set. You're going to get both bonuses, and you should have 2 slots left over for any other gear that you want to wear. Talk about skills next. I'm going to go through basics like spammables, healing, buffs. Now, in terms of spammables, since this is a bow skill, we can use Focus Aim for some very strong single target damage. You can also combine that with Sub Assault, since they're both timed abilities. You can cast your Sub Assault first, that has a 3-second timer, then hit Focused Aim that has a 1-second timer. Both of those should hit the enemy at about the same time, doing tons and tons of damage. Then we have damage over time skills. You'll basically want to apply these first before you do any of the spammable attacks. So we've got Arrow Barrage, again from the bow skill line. That's an AoE damage over time. It's going to damage all those enemies in the area. Poison Injection, that's a single target damage over time. I would save that for bosses and bigger enemies. And then Growing Swarm, same thing, single target damage over time. And it has a nice debuff effect called Minor Vulnerability. That's going to be really nice for groups. AoE skills, we have Subterranean Assault still, that counts as an AoE skill. And then when you combine that with Bombard from the bow skill line, this does AoE damage in front of you with the bow and then roots enemies in place. That's a very nice combo. It does a lot of damage. For buffs, you want to make sure that you're running either Bird of Prey or Camo Hunter. You'll also want to make sure you get Bull Netch. That's the stamina morph of the Netch skill that's giving you stamina sustain, as well as Major Brutality, increasing your weapon damage. And definitely check out Ice Fortress. That morph gives you the minor protection buff, so 8% extra damage resistance on your character. Really, really nice. Finally, for healing, Wardens do have some nice class-based healing. You've got Green Lotus and Soothing Spores, both from the Green Balance skill line. I would recommend you unlock both of those. And then Echoing Vigor is just a very nice stamina-based heal over time that actually is AoE, so you can heal your group members as well. Though that is from the PvP Alliance War skill line, so you'll have to do some PvP to unlock that. Finally, regarding ultimates, you're going to want to start with the Wild Guardian. That is the bear pet. Keep in mind that you're going to have to use the bear on both your front and your backup skill bar, because if you only have it on one bar, that pet is going to die as soon as you bar swap. So what do the skill bars look like? Well, we can actually run bow on both the main hand and the backup bar. For that main hand bow, we're starting off with Bombard, Sub-Assault, Camo Hunter, Focused Aim, Bird of Prey, and then Wild Guardian for the ultimate. Bombard is going to be your flex spot on the front bar. Again, that's AoE damage focused. If you want pure single target damage for a boss or something like that, you can substitute Growing Swarm. Then for your backup bow, you have Poison Injection, Endless Hail, Echoing Vigor, or some other heal in this position, Bull Netch and Ice Fortress for your buffs, and then remember you'll need to double slot Wild Guardian as the ultimate. Passives can be very tricky in ESO when you're starting out because you just might not have enough skill points. That's why I've tried to prioritize your most useful passives in this list. So the first three, these come from Animal Companions. Bond with Nature, this gives you a nice little heal from your pets. Savage Beast, this increases your ultimate generation, and Flourish gives you extra stamina and Magicka recovery. Ranger and Hawkeye, those are both bow passives, reducing your cost and increasing your damage. Maturation, this is from Green Balance, and it actually gives you 10% extra health on your character. Really, really good passive. And then don't forget your medium armor passives, Windwalker, Dexterity, and Agility. This gives you extra recovery, cost reduction, weapon critical, and then weapon damage. Coming up next, we got the Stamina Dragonknight. This is going to be a great option if you want a more melee-focused playstyle that's very strong for group PvE or even PvP. Race options for the Stamina Dragonknight covers most of the stamina-focused races. Orc is great for extra weapon damage and health. Dark Elf, you get extra Magicka as well as the weapon damage. Khajiit for the extra critical, and Nord is one of my favorites for the extra resistance, health, and ultimate gen. Food and drink, definitely check out Dubious Cameron Throne again for the extra stamina recovery. The Dragonnaites do get sustained from their ultimates, so buy stat food, meaning the blue quality health and stamina food. This can actually be a pretty decent option as well. And then Bewitch Sugar Skull is always great. Finally, for Mundus Stone, again, the Lover for the extra physical penetration or the Thief for the extra weapon critical. Those are my top two picks here. For gear set options, again, we're just going with basic overland content that's easy to get. Venomous Smite from the Greymoor chapter. This is a great damage over time focus set, which since we are kind of a dot focus build, this makes a lot of sense. And then Spriggan's, the extra physical penetration here is actually going to increase all of your damage. This is a classic set, both PvP and PvE, and it's pretty easy to get. For our spammable skills, actually two options here. You can get Stone Giant, the Dragonknight class skill. This is upfront AoE damage, and then you can kind of spam it multiple times to do single target damage. Or you can pick Bloodthirst from the Dual Wield skill line since we are going to be running Dual Wield on this setup. Either one is fine. For our damage over time kit, you can see this is where Dragonknight really shines. We have Venomous Claw from Ardent Flame skill line. This is single target damage. Then, since we're running Bow on the back bar, Endless Hail and Poison Injection. You've got Noxious Breath, also from the Ardent Flame skill line. This is AoE damage over time. And then I thought just throw on Deadly Cloak here for the extra AoE dot damage. Speaking of those AoEs, this build actually has a lot of AoE potential. Stone Giant, the initial cast is AoE, plus Noxious Breath is a very strong AoE, and then we're going to combine this with Steel Tornado from the Dual Wield skill line, just for that extra AoE and execute damage. Under buffs, check out Molten Armaments. This gives you major brutality. Then Volatile Armor is important as well for the extra armor buff. Camo Hunter does give you Minor Berserk. That's from the Fighters Guild. I definitely recommend you pick that up. And under healing, this is where Stam DK is a little bit tough to play. Cauterize is the main class heal, but it's not that great, so I would recommend picking up Echoing Vigor. That's from the Alliance War, or Ring of Preservation from the Fighters Guild skill line. So you have at least 2 heals. Then finally, ultimates on the Stam DK are very strong, you guys. Standard of Might. This does excellent AoE damage. It also protects you and helps all your abilities do more damage. And then Magma Shell, this is going to be really nice for group play because it protects you and your group from damage. Onto the skill bar setup, our main hand is going to be Dual Wield. We've got Venomous Claw, Steel Tornado, Camo Hunter, Stone Giant, Deadly Cloak, and then Standard of Might is the ultimate. Backup skill bar is going to be our bow. We've got Noxious Breath, Endless Hail, Echoing Vigor, or another heal. like Cauterize or Ring of Preservation. Then you've got your buffs, Molten Armaments, Volatile Armor, and then Magma Shell for the back bar ultimate. Here are the most important passives for your Stamina Dragonknight, starting off with Battle Roar. This actually gives you extra stats every time you cast your ultimate. Absolutely great for Sustain. Speaking of Sustain Combustion, when you apply poison to an enemy, this also gives you stamina back, which is very nice. Mountain's Blessing, this actually gives us extra weapon damage, which is unique to the Dragonknight class, so that's really cool. Make sure you pick that up. And then Searing Heat, this makes your claw and your breath damage over time effects. This makes those last longer, so you definitely want that. Then we've got dual wield passives, Controlled Fury and Twin Blade and Blunt. I think those are the best ones. Twin Blade and Blunt specifically is very strong because you can get things like 5% extra weapon critical just by using a dagger. And then of course, don't forget your medium armor passives, Dexterity, Windwalker, and Agility. We already talked about those, so make sure you pick those up. Number 3 on our list is going to be the Werewolf, and Werewolves are actually a lot of fun to play in Elder Scrolls Online. This build will be great for solo, overland content, Maelstrom Arena, or even group DPS. Werewolf is a little bit different in that any class can technically be a werewolf, but my top 2 picks for classes would probably be the Stamina Sorcerer and Stamina Nightblade. Stamina Sorcerer just for the cost reduction and increased physical damage. And for this setup, especially Nightblade's extra passive health, Magicka, and stamina recovery, that's going to help a lot. For race options, pretty typical melee stam race setup here. Orc and Dark Elf will be very close. Imperial is going to be a nice option, actually, if you have access to this for the increased health, stamina, and cost reduction. And I always like Nord just for the extra health and the resistances. Food and drink is very important for the Werewolf because we technically use all 3 stat pools. Bewitched Sugar Skulls comes out way ahead on this, guys. Remember, you can buy this in Guild Traders, and it should be pretty cheap as well. The extra health recovery and max stats is going to be perfect for this build. For the Mundus Stone, I still do like Lover and Thief. Mentioned those earlier. But also check out the Steed Mundus for the extra movement speed and the extra health recovery. That's going to be amazing in content like Maelstrom Arena. Werewolf builds have lots of great gear set options, but again, we're going with easy to get overland sets. In this case, we're using Griffins from the Somerset chapter. The extra movement speed and access to Minor Force, which we don't get from any of our Werewolf skills, that's going to be really strong. And also the Eternal Vigor set from Greymoor. This thing boosts all of our recoveries through the roof, which is going to be great for sustaining all of our abilities and our health. Onto skills, Howl of Agony is our main spammable ability. And then keep in mind with the morph that we've chosen for the ultimate here, heavy attacks actually hit multiple targets and they're very, very strong. I would consider that spammable too, basically. For damage over time, Claws of Life is very strong AoE damage over time. Technically Brutal Pounce, and then light attacks, again, with this specific ultimate, those light attacks are going to apply a bleed dot effect, which is really strong too, especially on single target. AoEs again, Brutal Pounce, the initial gap closer is AoE, plus the new Execute from that skill is also AoE. Claws of Life, the upfront damage of this is actually very strong. It hits all targets in a pretty wide conal area, and then again, your heavy attacks are going to hit multiple targets. So all of those abilities combined can do very good AoE damage. For buffs, Hircine's Rage. This buff does give us Major Berserk, which is 25% bonus damage, though that part of the buff only works when you're at full health. So what I do is I actually use it before entering combat, and that way I have extra upfront damage. And then Deafening Roar, you guys, this is very good for both group and solo play because it's going to debuff all of your enemies, reducing their resistances and applying Minor Maim. That makes them do 15% less damage to you and your group. Both of these skills are amazing. Healing, we have 2 pretty good options. Hircine's Rage is going to be our burst heal, though it does cost a lot of magicka, so you're going to want to depend more on your Claws of Life. Remember, that is an AoE, so the more enemies you hit, the more healing you get. And then, of course, with our set and our food buff, we have a lot of health recovery, so we're making up a lot of healing that way too. Finally, the ultimate morph I've chosen for this build is the Berserker morph. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Light attacks apply a bleed, and the heavy attacks do splash damage. If you want a damage-focused werewolf setup, that's the morph that you want. Skill bar setup is very simple, obviously, because we don't have more than 6 werewolf abilities in total. Deafening Roar, Feral Pounce, or Brutal Pounce, whatever morph you prefer there. Hircine's Rage we mentioned, and then Howl of Agony for the spammable. Claws of Life for the dot and the healing. And then we've got the Werewolf Berserker Ultimate. For passives, I'm assuming that you're a Stamina Sorcerer. This will obviously change if you're a Nightblade or something else. But Power Stone, just to reduce the cost of the Werewolf transformation, this is really strong. And then Unholy Knowledge gives us cost reduction, which is also great on the Werewolf. Blood Rage is your most important Werewolf passive, in my opinion, just because that increases your time in Werewolf form, makes it easier to stay in the transformation. Savage Strength is close behind that because it gives us so much weapon damage and resistances. And then don't forget about Call of the Pack. This actually works even if you're just solo because it counts you towards your transformation timer, making that transformation last longer. And then we've got the usual medium armor passives here, Windwalker, Agility, Dexterity. Keep in mind that weapon passives do not work while you're in werewolf form because you've got claws, not weapons anymore. But you'll still probably want those when you're outside the werewolf. Coming in at number 2 on our list is the Magicka Templar, and you guys know me, I love this class. It can do just about anything in the game, from DPS, solo, healer, even PvP. This will be an all-around strong setup that's good at everything. Race options for Magicka Templar include the usual Magicka races. We got Breton, High Elf, Dark Elf, Khajiit. I'm going to rank Breton a little bit higher, just assuming that you might be a newer player. Breton is probably the best new player-friendly race because of the extra sustain. In terms of food or drink, Witchmother's Brew is going to be nice. Again, especially if you're newer, because this does give you extra recovery. If you feel like you're sustaining okay without that, then definitely check out Tri-Staff Food. This gives you all 3 resource pools and even more stats. So this will be great for like PvP or soloing where you need the extra stamina. For Mundustone, Lover, and the Thief are going to be great options. But also, if you can get your crit chance high enough, the Shadow is actually very strong, especially on the Templar because they already have bonus critical damage. Sets on this build are going to provide a great mix of both healing and damage potential. Starting with Winter's Respite from the Greymoor chapter, this is a great new set. It gives you strong stats and passive healing, which is a great combination when you mix this in with Puncturing Sweeps. Keep in mind that heals your group as well. And then Crafty Alfiq is just a very solid damage set, which again, more Magicka equals more healing and more damage. For our spammable skills, we've got Puncturing Sweeps. This does damage and healing, plus it is AoE, which is insane. And then, since we are running a Lightning Staff heavy attacks do 100% of their damage to all enemies in an area, which is very strong. Damage over time, we've got Vampire's Bane. This is a single target damage over time, so very strong against bosses. Then you've got Wall of Elements from the Destruction Staff skill line. Solar Barrage is actually AoE and damage over time, as well as Blazing Spear, same thing there. And then Radiant Glory, the Templar Execute, probably one of the strongest executes in the game. For our AoE skills, Puncturing Sweeps again, Wall of Elements, Blazing Spear, Solar Barrage, and of course that heavy attack. For buffs, Cleansing Ritual is going to be especially strong in PvP because that cleanses negative effects off of you and your group. Channeled Focus gives us lots of defense and Magicka sustain, while Elemental Drain can give us even more Magicka sustain on top of that. And then I do recommend Inner Light from the Mages Guild for the extra max Magicka and critical. Templar excels at healing. Breath of Life, one of the strongest heals in the game. That's a class skill, as well as Cleansing Ritual for the AoE healing. And then I do recommend leveling up your Restoration Staff. That means you can heal in a group situation very easy for like random dungeons. Pick up Healing Springs, Radiating Regeneration, and then Combat Prayer. For ultimates, all the class ultimates are actually very strong, you guys. Crescent Sweep is nice for both PvE and PvP, just a good burst ultimate. Solar Prison or Disturbance for the AoE damage reduction. And then Remembrance is a nice emergency heal. Again, great for both PvP and PvE. A sample skill bar setup for this build will look something like this. Running Lightning Staff on the main hand, and then a Restoration Staff backup. Got Wall of Elements, Inner Light, Breath of Life, Puncturing Sweeps, Elemental Drain, and then Solar Prison or Disturbance. On the Restoration Staff, we've got Healing Springs, or you can run Combat Prayer there. Blazing Spear, Radiating Regen, Cleansing Ritual, Channel Focus, and then Remembrance for the back bar ult. Under important passives, I would say Spear Wall is probably the best passive if you're either considering solo PvE or even PvP. That's because this gives us minor protection anytime we use our Puncturing Sweep spammable. Very, very strong passive. Prism is great as well for the extra ultimates. Illuminate does give us minor sorcery, so that's 10% extra spell damage. Make sure you pick up that one. And then Burning Light as well, as that's the Templar passive that can proc extra damage on your Adric Spear abilities. Also from the Restoring Light tree, Sacred Ground is probably the best passive you'll get there. That gives you minor mending, so that's 8% extra healing done while you're standing either within your ritual or your rune. Then you got your light armor passives. I recommend Evocation for the extra cost reduction, Prodigy for the extra critical, and then Concentration for the spell penetration. In terms of Destruction Staff passives, probably the best ones to get early. Tri-Focus. This gives you the extra AoE splash damage on the lightning staff that I talked about with those heavy attacks. And then Ancient Knowledge. Depending on your staff type, this gives you extra damage done. So this will buff your AoE damage by 8%. Finally, our number one easy build on this list is going to be the Pet Sorcerer, which is made up of pet damage, passive skills, and just heavy attacks. I've swapped the races on this build, mostly because sustain should not be an issue at all. So you can instead pick a more damage-focused race like High Elf or Dark Elf. For the food, again, sustain should not be an issue, so you can do the blue quality bi-stat food that's max health and max magicka. You can also look at something like the purple tri-stat food if you need more stamina. For Mundus, my top two is going to be the Lover and then the Shadow for the extra spell critical damage. Gear set options for this build are going to focus on critical damage and pets. For example, we've got the Necropotent set. This is from the base game, and it gives you tons of max magicka, even more when you have a pet summoned, which we will pretty much all the time. And then Mother's Sorrow is an excellent set for Magicka Sorcerer. This increases your spell critical chance, and crit chance on the Sorcerer is tied to our healing, so this is just a great synergy here. For spammable skills on the Sorcerer, you'll have some pretty cool options here. Like I mentioned, just the basic heavy attack on the Lightning Staff will do a ton of damage, both single target and AoE, and it doesn't cost any magicka to cast. Now, if you want something a little bit more advanced, you can actually slot skills like Force Pulse from the Destruction Staff. You can also use Crystal Fragments from the Sorcerer class line. Both of those do a lot of damage and can be part of a more active rotation. For damage over time, we've got the usual Wall of Elements since we are using Destruction Staff. We've got Lightning Flood, Volatile Familiar, which is our main pet damage. Then, of course, the heavy attack, which we mentioned earlier. All these skills are technically AoE as well, so not only can we do strong single target damage over time, but sorcerers are absolutely amazing at clearing through multiple packs of enemies for things like grinding experience and grinding gold. For our buffs, Critical Surge is going to be absolutely essential. This heals us every time we do crit damage up to once every second. And then Boundless Storm gives us movement speed as well as our armor buff. I do recommend Inner Light from the Mages Guild for the extra spell critical and max magicka. Bound Armaments is another Sorcerer class skill that gives us even more max magicka. Great for that passive Pet Sorc playstyle. And then I do recommend a damage shield on your front bar. That's going to be Hardened Ward, again from the Sorcerer class. This is a massive damage shield for you and your pets. As we mentioned, Critical Surge does give us healing. And the Twilight Matriarch, this is going to be our burst heal, basically our emergency heal on the build. That is another pet. For the ultimates here, I recommend two Sorcerer ultimates specifically. Negate is going to be very strong for group setting in both PvE and PvP. Then I prefer the Greater Storm Atro for solo builds. This is another pet that you can throw on the ground that lasts almost 30 seconds. So it's going to do lots of damage for you while you can be doing other things like healing, roll dodging, blocking. Here's the skill loadout I recommend for this build. It's going to be double Destruction Staff, both main hand and backup. On that front bar staff, we are using Inner Light, the Volatile Familiar, Hardened Ward, Twilight Matriarch, Bound Armaments, and then Elemental Rage for the ultimate. Remember, for the back bar, you do need to have your pets slotted on both bars so they don't die right away. We've got Wall of Elements, Volatile Familiar, and the Matriarch again. Then our two buffs, Boundless Storm and Crit Surge. And then finally the Storm Atronach as the back bar ultimate. For our important passives on the Mag Sorc, Unholy Knowledge, this does reduce the cost of all our abilities. And then Power Stone, that's going to reduce the cost of your ultimates. So lots of cost reduction on the Mag Sorc, which is great. Expert Summoner is a very good passive that I recommend, especially for soloing. This gives you bonus health when you have a pet active. Finally, Capacitor gives you extra magicka recovery. That's another class passive. In the light armor skill line, still you want to pick up Evocation, Prodigy, and Concentration. Those are probably the best three there. And under Destruction Staff, Tri-Focus for the extra splash damage on your Lightning Staff, and Ancient Knowledge for the extra 8% AoE damage since we are using a Lightning Staff. All right, everybody, and with that, that's going to wrap up our top 5 easy builds for the Elder Scrolls Online. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, don't forget to crush that like button. Let me know what you think in the comments below, or just let me know if you have any questions. Now, I know this was a lot of information, so I'll be putting together written guides for all 5 of these beginner builds and putting those up on my website in case you have questions about where a specific gear set or a specific skill or passive comes from. Check the description below this video for links to all that content. Of course, if you're new around here, make sure you're also subscribed to the channel for plenty more build videos just like this one. I also publish a lot of new player guides and ESO discussion, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you don't miss anything. If you'd like to support the channel further, there's links to my social media down below, as well as the website, which I mentioned earlier. Make sure you check those out. You can also now become a channel member for access to additional perks. Click the join button for more information on that. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe, and I will see you around in the next video.